Where do you go when you die? What do you take with you when you die? These are questions that I've contemplated from a very young age. In my late teens and early 20s, I often felt an overwhelming fear of death. Sometimes this was straightforward. It was feelings of dread about the mystery and inevitability. And other times it manifested in less obvious ways. One of these was a phobia of airplanes. When I was slated to return to Korea for the third time, I shared my concern of flying for 14 hours straight with Reverend Wong, and that I know it's safe, but my more primal brain feels like the plane could crash at any time, killing all of the passengers, myself included. To that she responded, "Oh, in that case, just resolve your mind in gratitude to the fourfold grace and die, knowing you've lived well." Okay, yeah. So this kind of blasé attitude towards death is something that makes Buddhism somewhat unique. While it can feel a bit paradoxical at first because we exalt and value life, the reason becomes clear when we think about the principle of cause and effect. So in Won-Buddhism, we believe in no birth, no death, and rebirth. In this belief, death becomes a gateway for your true nature, rather than an end. So death is important in Won-Buddhism, even while we value living. And actually, next week on June 1st, we'll be celebrating the day that Master Sotaesan, the founding teacher of Won-Buddhism, entered into nirvana. As Master Sotaesan said, there are many ways we must follow, but if you reduce them down, they are nothing more than the way of life and death. Our practice in everyday life is like one side of the coin, and on the other side is our practice in death. Each is fundamentally linked to each other as we view birth and death as a cycle, just like Il-Wan. But how does one practice for dying? The most commonly emphasized point in our scriptures is to let go of all attachments, gathering yourself in a pure, concentrated spirit. If you have any grudges, the founding master recommends that you reach out to try to resolve things. If you have any persistent attachments or things you have trouble letting go of, he suggests doing your best at that time to simply let go and be in the moment. And by letting go of these attachments, gathering your clear and focused mind, it enables you to die peacefully and with grace. When we come to this realization, it becomes important to think about and prepare for our own deaths and to support others in theirs. For me, I had the honor of taking care of my grandfather for 3 years when he was in the process of dying. My late grandfather was the Reverend Thomas Sin. He served as a Lutheran pastor in Virginia, Maryland, and Florida before retiring after over 40 years of service. He had a deep and resonant voice, and that made him a great storyteller and singer. And up until his sickness at 89, he would drive into town by himself almost every day and have lunch. However, in 2019, he contracted pneumonia, and he was hospitalized a few weeks later, collapsing, and then many doctors estimated he only had a few more weeks to live. He couldn't eat, he couldn't walk, and he could barely speak if he ever was conscious. My grandfather had made it clear that he didn't wish to have any invasive or prolonged treatments. He wanted to die a peaceful death, so we started to make preparations. But while we expected the death to come in a matter of weeks, the human body is quite resilient, and he actually ended up making a partial recovery. He was no longer unconscious most of the time, but he had very little energy and began to develop dementia as well. This was very difficult for him as someone who had been so independent for most of his life. My grandfather held a lot of value in what he could do for other people. So when he was confronted with needing full-time help, he really struggled. The first thing he needed to let go of, and the most difficult, was his car keys. I would sometimes find him sneaking from his bed to open the front door. He would pretend that he was just looking out the window, checking on things, but usually you don't need to open the door to do that. And it was painful for him to recognize that it was no longer safe for him to drive. He would sometimes become so tired just from going to the front door that he needed help getting back to the bed. Many wish to avoid the illness that comes before death, and my grandfather was definitely one of them. Initially, he was sincerely afraid of becoming a burden. It actually took him around 2 months before he accepted any help with shaving, but eventually the beard became too annoying for him, and he asked for help. Now, this prolonged process of dying was actually beautiful in a way because it allowed him to slowly confront and let go of each of these attachments over a long period of time as he grew closer and closer to death. It wasn't always easy for him, especially at the beginning, but at a certain point he became calm and peaceful. In the last year, we began hospice, and he had grown so weak that he could no longer move from bed. We took special care to keep his room very clean and quiet to help him focus. And he had very little energy. Most of the time, he would sleep or rest somewhere in between consciousness and unconsciousness. He always appreciated having someone nearby, though. Even just getting up to get water, I would sometimes hear him calling out, "Hello, is anybody there?" And I would come back as quickly as I could, say hello calmly, and hold his hand while I helped him to drink. The most common activity we did together, though, was just sit in silence. He would usually rest his eyes or sleep peacefully, and I would either meditate, read, or do homework. These moments of peaceful calm were very powerful opportunities to simply be together, and I cherished those times. When the end finally did come for him, it was natural and peaceful, like a quiet exhalation. This echoes how the founding master describes death as being similar to taking a breath or closing your eyes, a natural process. All we have to do is let go and breathe. While the body of my grandfather had passed away, the true spirit of him continues on in the love that he shared for me and the rest of my family, the spiritual communities he helped to develop, and in the transformations that his body goes through as he passed on to the next life. As the founding master says, nothing is completely annihilated, but merely goes through a change in form. Even after death, the parts that make up our body spread throughout the world and take on new forms. And his influence is right here now in me giving this talk. And thus it's with all of you as well. And in a similar vein, we're all interconnected and linked. Now, the founding master recommends that we start packing our bags for the next life around 40. And by that he means we should be mindful of our own mortality, make sure that we prepare well, communicate end-of-life care decisions and desires to our family and to our medical team, so that when the end does come, we can approach it peacefully without having to worry about settling issues. It also means being aware of and working on letting go of our attachments when you can, starting early to get a head start. For me, watching my grandfather struggling with accepting help after becoming ill was a great lesson in not becoming too attached to my own health. I often try to keep in mind now what I take for granted and how I would feel if I were to lose that, these legs that carry me. how would I feel without them? Could I let them go? These eyes, which bring me joy, can I let those go? The independence that I value so much, could I let that go if I needed to? In this way, I try to cultivate a sense of awareness of my own attachments so that I can work on letting them go early, even if I'm not 40 yet. Death is something to be aware of at all stages, as it provides the context for how we live our lives. As we understand our own mortality and impermanence, selfishness also naturally becomes less relevant. The benefit that's created by material wealth only lasts as long as our singular life, but the benefit we create by building communities, spreading love, and teaching continues endlessly over many lifetimes. While dying itself is not always pleasant or beautiful, it can force us to directly confront losing things that we value the most. In it lies a wonderful opportunity to let go of our own attachments as we face one of the few universal human experiences, and a wonderful opportunity to die with grace.